This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 49.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Marjaba. Ramsey says he doesn't like exotic sports cars, but I think that's just because he doesn't fit in them.
Hello, SE Nation. We've been talking about demonstrations on We the SEs for a while now. We've had a bunch of guests who are dedicated to training SEs to do demos, like Brian Geary from show 42 and Julie Hansen, who was on show 39. Now, this show is about demos, but it's a bit different. I am joined by Peter Cohan, the author of Great Demo: How to Create and Execute Stunning Software Demonstration. And instead of doing an interview and talking about the do's and don'ts of demonstrations, Peter wanted me to perform a demo for him on a tool of my choosing. I've recently stumbled across a tool called X.AI, which helps folks like me and like anyone who's in sales actually schedule meetings. And I did a demo for that, and I had him critique me, or he volunteered to critique me. I think he was happy to do it. So there's a YouTube video accompanying this episode. Check out the YouTube channel. It's We the Sales Engineers, because I'm being original. And that's the plan for today. So let's get started. The tool, as I mentioned, is called X.AI. It is an artificial intelligence that, according to their website, solves the hassle of scheduling meetings. You ask the AI to set up a meeting with a bunch of people, could be one or more, and it will correspond with them in order to set it up. I'm not affiliated with this company, but I think it's a cool tool, and it wasn't a hard tool to show, which Peter will actually comment about. So I'm going to jump in right away. Now, this was a video conference, which meant I was sharing my screen with Peter and going through the demo. If you want to see that, check out the YouTube video. The link will be available on wethesalesengineers.com/show49. For the podcast purpose, I will be narrating some of what's going on. For example, for this first tidbit, I go through some discovery questions and everything's going well, but then I take it too far, and Peter comments on that. You will see what I mean momentarily. How do you set up your meetings today?
So meetings today are set up in the traditional old manual method using Outlook calendars and asking questions about what time slots look like they're available, and then tending to go back and forth in a painful serial fashion.
Okay, so I did notice how you actually sent me your time slots. You had like 15 time slots on the email asking me which one would work for me, and luckily one did. Do you usually set up meetings with more than one person at a time?
I'll say yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you set me up for that one. So, and they're usually external. They're not within your company. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, that's correct, yes.
All right. How many meetings do you schedule a day?
How many? So it's a range, anywhere from probably one or two to 5 or 6.
All right. So let's say one
day.
On average. How long does it take you to actually? How many back and forths does it take you to set up the meeting?
Well, so that's going to be dependent on how many participants and how everybody is organized. But it generally actually only takes about 1 or 2 go back and forth to get it done.
Okay, and that's if you have like 1 or 2 people you're trying to meet, or like if you have 5, does that ever happen?
So playing this as if it were real life. What might typically happen is you're dealing with 1 or 2 people from, let's say, within my organization. I'm going to play as if I'm in a company and the way I used to do this, and meeting with 1 or 2 or 3 people from another organization, but typically organized by somebody from that organization. So, let's say I'm communicating with a let's say pre-sales manager, and he's has two other people he wants to bring into the call. He's got a head of sales, and he's got a lead SE.
Okay. And he usually sets up the meeting for you. Or it goes back and forth.
Well, he might set up the meeting, or I might set up a Zoom meeting or whatsoever. But in terms of finding the times, it would be, we're really looking at, let's say, 5 different calendars, but coordinated by 2 different people.
Okay.
Myself and my key contact.
So would it be beneficial for you to actually take yourself out of the equation, just have somebody else do it for you?
Somebody else physically, or a tool?
Well, whichever. Like, generally speaking, if you have an assistant, they're not really cheap. But let's say
that is, yeah. So when I was, so full background information. So my last gainful employment, I was the head of a business unit and had about 120 reports, and I had a PA, I had an assistant, and she did set up many of my meetings, but I actually did a lot myself as well. But typically speaking, when I needed to coordinate between more than one person on myself, I asked her to organize it for me.
Okay, and now you still have an assistant, or you?
No, I'm a sole today. So between you and I today, I'm a sole operator. But you could play this as if I have. Well, how would you like to do it for the purposes of your demo?
Well, okay, maybe it's easier to just give you my assumptions. And
okay, let's do that.
So, right,
but by the way, your discovery questions are good.
Thank you. So, for example, you today, you don't have an assistant, and you have to schedule all your meetings yourself, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if you had an assistant today, forgetting about how much you have to pay for her services or his services, would it be beneficial for you?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Because I could offload the time and energy of dealing with that.
So having, let's say, an artificial intelligence assistant, where it's not a human being, but it's a tool that can do some of the work that your assistant would do. Is that beneficial?
Well, yeah, and be careful. That's kind of a leading question, but yeah, I'll just say yes.
But okay, so how would you do that instead?
How would I go about that?
You said my question is leading.
Well, it's because you just went through the process of asking me if I had an assistant, does it take a lot of time and energy? And I said yes. So you said, well, what if you had an automated assistant of some kind? Would that be beneficial? And I've already confirmed that yes, having
okay.
So it's what you might do instead is say, well, would it be interesting to you if you could have those same capabilities, but number one, done automatically by a tool, and number two, the tool that didn't make mistakes.
Right.
By the way, you might also ask along those lines. You might ask the question: do you ever have a situation where either your assistant makes a mistake, or somebody on the other side makes a mistake, and you have to go through the same process again? And the answer would be, or you have a change that takes place on your calendar, and you got to reschedule everything. And the answer would be, oh yeah, that happens fairly frequently, and that's probably as problematic and to a certain degree can be embarrassing as anything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good idea.
There you go.
All right.
Anytime there are manual processes, errors will creep in, and errors propagate, meaning they tend to get worse with each consumption of that error by another party or another system.
Yes. Well, it's happened to me on several occasions where I'm meeting people with different time zones, and we don't specify the time zone, and everybody shows up at a different time.
That's right. Or they're in Arizona and you're not sure what it is.
After the discovery, I go on to share my screen. And as it turns out, there is a technique for that. Right.
By the way, 90%, 95%, maybe 99% of people, when you ask, can you see my screen? If you're sharing anything, they're going to say yes.
Okay.
But what you don't know, and particularly independent with what tool you're using, is are they seeing the let me rephrase, are they using their full screen to see what you are? And in many cases, you may need to gently remind people to go into full screen mode. Would you like an additional tip?
Yes, please, anytime.
So take your mouse, and this is actually probably a good time to do this. Take your mouse, move it to the top left-hand corner of your workspace there, or your screen, and ask me if I see your mouse moving.
All right. Do you see my mouse moving?
I do at the top left corner. Now do the same thing in the bottom right corner.
Can you still see it?
There it is. Now I see it. Yes. By the way, what you've done with that little mouse in the upper left, mouse in the bottom right is confirmed a couple of things and trained your audience in a small way. You've confirmed that not only can they see your screen, but they're seeing the same screen real estate that you are, so that they're not clipping anything. And you've also begun to drive interactivity.
Okay, that's good.
There you go. All right, keep going.
At this point, I start the demo by whiteboarding the process of setting up a meeting without using X.AI and with using X.AI to compare and contrast how much time it will actually save the user. And at this point, the critique begins.
What you've done is a very nice demo of a very easy tool to show. Does that make sense?
Yes.
In terms of, go ahead, sorry.
It's easy in the sense that of what it does, but it's just I found it hard to show because, like, what are you going to show? Like sending an email, just thinking creatively about what I actually need to show you to make this demo a good-looking demo was the hard part about this thing.
Okay. Well, so let me offer you some recommendations then.
Please.
Go to there are a couple things you could do. One, and you did this very nicely with what is often referred to as a before and after. So you develop the before by having to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then you develop the after with the back and forth, but all done almost exclusively done in an automated fashion by Amy, the AI assistant, right?
Yes.
So that's really good, and it becomes very obvious in this case as one way. Now, when you were chatting with Julie Hansen, and you were asking to go through some of the key elements of great demo methodology, one of the things she said was do the last thing first. And one way you might start off this demo is go to the screen where it showed from the demo's been scheduled and you can reschedule or cancel, if you would please.
Yep.
So so there you go. So this is both the starting point and the end point, and this is an example of what she was talking about and what basically I introduced as great demo methodology. And the verbiage is something like, what you're looking at here is a meeting that was scheduled between several parties, all done automatically by an AI assistant, wherein several rounds of email went back and forth between multiple players. A time was found that was acceptable to all the parties, and the meeting organizer, Ramsey, the only activity he had to do was say, Amy, set up a meeting, and Amy, that meeting looks good. Does that make sense? All done automatically. This is the do the last thing first, because this one screen, to a certain degree, is all you may ever need to show.
Okay.
You can do that setup and so forth. You could show the intermediary things, but if you present this with that kind of verbal overview, what will happen next is people will say, "Oh, I get it." They'll get it because this is a very straightforward application, and they'll start to ask questions. Although, very frankly, right here in this one screen, about 90% of the questions that somebody might ask can be answered just by glancing at the screen and perhaps a little bit of verbiage. Does that all make sense to you?
It does. Yes.
So that's the concept behind doing the last thing first. And in many cases, you can reduce the amount of time you actually have to spend driving around in a demo, and you can increase the impact of the deliverable rather dramatically by simply taking the customer directly to the payoff screen.
Okay.
Which is this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting to a point where I did this unintentionally and it worked. And my an hour-long demo was cut down to 5 minutes. So
tell me what happened.
So part of our product lineup is we have physical equipment and we have virtual which is representative of the same physical stuff, but it's just software.
Uh-huh.
They already use our physical stuff, and they wanted to talk about our software. So before the actual demo, I just ran a test that they would run on physical equipment. I ran it on the virtual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just showed them the test running, and I asked them who knows what this test is, and everybody knew. I'm like, okay, well, this is the same test that you ran on physical. I just moved it to a virtual port, and it's doing the exact same thing. And we said, okay, that's all we needed to know.
And that, boys and girls, is the power of doing the last thing first. Do you have that? Do you have? Are you able to bring up that screen and show me what it looks like?
Which screen? Sorry.
That test run. Can you bring that up and either show it running or potentially even better, show it complete?
It was for a different company, and it was in person.
Oh, you don't have access to that screen anymore.
No, I do not.
Okay. All right. So that description, and you probably could have even gone a step further by completing the test and simply doing your same verbiage. Do you guys have an idea? Do you know what you're looking at here? And they'd say, well, yeah, that's just showing the completed tests for the equipment. And then your comment could be, yeah, and this was all done in the virtual space as opposed to having to actually set up the physical hardware. And they would say, and I quote, whoa, that's impressive. I got to get me some of that.
Yeah. Well, the funny part is I did this all by mistake. This was within my first year of being an SE, and I didn't have a clue of what I was doing until my next year. So
okay.
I can't take credit about anything that I did that year. It just happened.
Well, but we can all learn from what happened. So the fact that they got it so rapidly is validation of this concept.
Yep, I agree.
But if you think in terms now of, let's say, traditional workflow-based, well, this is workflow software, but traditional enterprise software where, there are multiple workflows that need to be executed, multiple players are involved. What people will often do is try to do what's referred to as a day in the life demo. Are you familiar with those?
I can estimate what it means, but I have never heard the term.
Wow. Okay. So it's in the world of pre-sales, it's very often used. Senior management will often say, we need an end-to-end demo. We need some way to show people everything that our software can do. Put together an end-to-end demo, or show them a day in the life. What's the user experience like for our tool? And those demos. Oh, there you go. Congratulations.
Yep.
Those demos are often extraordinarily painful because they will start off in many cases. So I'll give you an example with using this tool. You've been using this tool for how long?
A couple of days.
A couple of days. Okay. What did you have to do to get it set up and installed before your first use? Probably not a lot, but what did you have to do?
Oh yeah, I had to fill in a lot of this information, put in my preferences, connect the calendars, scheduling hours. I didn't have to do a lot of these, but I could if I needed to.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you're saying like we would show the customer every single one of these steps where we connect every single.
You got it. Yeah. Most traditional demos, they'll start off by showing people how you'd set all this stuff up. And for big B2B software, that could take minutes or hours in some cases. And the scary thing about it is that stuff that is done once and then forgotten about, and yet people seem to feel obligated to demo it. So one of the things we teach in Great Demo is the difference between setup mode and daily use mode. And setup mode is all the stuff you would either do once, or in many cases the vendor would do once, or in implementation by somebody, it would only be done once and then forgotten about because it's set up.
Yep.
Daily use mode is what happens exactly that. When you come into work on Monday morning as as an individual contributor, what is your workflow like? As a manager, what is your workflow like? As an executive, what is your workflow like? And the difference between setup mode and daily use mode is huge with respect to these kinds of demos. So let me pause there and ask, does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make a lot of sense. For me personally, I don't even show the daily use stuff. I just show like the end result stuff. Or at least that's what I like to show.
Well, then you're way ahead of the curve. So not showing, if you can show the end result, that then enables you to verbally describe what daily use is like. So for example, go back to your end screen there. The meeting was set up. Yeah, four meeting schedules. So that's an end result screen. That effectively says the workflow has been completed. Here's what happened, and here are the benefits that are associated with that. Here's the gain that was associated with that. So here a meeting was set up between a pile of different people. It was all done automatically by an AI agent, as opposed to what may have consumed you and the other player's time to the extent of 10 to 20 minutes every day, just looking for meeting times. When you add that up, that's a lot every week. That's a huge amount every year.
Yep.
So So if you're doing this, you're way ahead of the curve, and you've stumbled into what we teach as one of the primary ideas.
Well, like I try to do that. It's not perfect by any means, and I stumbled into it by doing it the old-fashioned way and showing step by step how it works, and then I got yelled at by my manager. That's how I stumbled into it, but I learned.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good.
After having discussed how I stumbled onto the same process that Peter actually teaches in his courses, Peter was very keen on seeing me demo the products that I actually use on a daily basis, which is not something I want to do on the podcast. I just like to keep them separate because one is not affecting the other. But since I wanted to show Peter, it's not every day you have Peter on the phone with you, actually looking to give you critique that will make you better, I took a few minutes to set up a simple configuration. In the end, I had the configuration working, and since it was a test and measurement, I had a test running, and I was measuring the performance of my virtual device under test. We discuss what my demo would look like. I tell Peter that for my demos, all configuration would be set up ahead of time, and all I would show the customer is the test running with some fancy graphs if need be. So they can see that the traffic is running, IP, whether it's Ethernet traffic or IP traffic. So in networking, you have basically Ethernet packets or IP packets going from point A to point B, and that's what we'd show. So Peter comments on my process and what the majority of SEs he's seen do in their demos and what we can actually learn and make it better.
What you did really well, and you do this naturally, and you do much better than most SEs that we see, is you just showed the relevant portions of this particular exercise. All the stuff you did to set this up, assuming the customer doesn't typically see that in your demo, is the right way to do it. The way the dialogue should work is effectively you saying, okay, we've set up the environment, we're running it, we're executing it, and as you can see, blah, 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 it's all working fine, or that router's insufficient and we need to do something else or whatever. But you either confirm that things work well or you've identified the problem that needs to be addressed. And what should happen at that point is the customer either says, okay, I get it, this looks great, or they start to ask some questions like, okay, well, what happens if I need to do this? They might even ask something like, well, how hard is it to set this up for each test? At which point you may at some point actually be obligated to go through the workflow of setting up for this particular test. But the delightful thing about that request is it took place after they saw the value that your test suite actually provides to them. Does that all make sense?
Yes, and it happens quite often. So my customers write the standards for most of the things that I show them. So they end up going really into the weeds of what is supported, what's not supported. And part of my job beforehand is to try to understand what they're going to ask me. just by like doing a good discovery or just talking to my other colleagues who do the same thing, and try to anticipate what I can show them, what I can't.
Oh, good. So I have to share with you that you are atypical with respect to pre-sales and demos, and in a good way. Do you realize that that's the case?
Well, no, but I got to tell you that I'm blushing a little bit.
Well, that's it. It is the case, because 90% of your colleagues would have had me watch you setting this thing up. They would have said, okay, well, let's go ahead and show you how to set this up. Here, let's go back to effectively a clean screen, as if you were just starting this whole thing out again. And they would have gone through the process of not only setting it up, but they would have been describing all the options you could do as you put this all together. They'd say, well, this could be this could be this. If you had this, you can do this. And they literally could have spent 30 or 40 minutes going through this portion of things before they ever got to the point where they actually ran the test.
Yeah, I've seen that, and that's how I started until I realized that I'm bored from talking.
Yeah. So if you're contemplating doing a podcast on this, I could easily see something where we might want to talk about 3 major portions of a demo, or the potential demo that people might do. There's the end result, which is what I really push, that enables you to really describe what has taken place, what's in it for the customer, what the value is, and what business problems this is solving for them, all in 1 or 2 or 3 easy to consume screens. There's the execution of the workflow once it has been set up, which is what I generally recommend is the second thing in the demo, and done with the fewest number of clicks or steps to execute it, because you're trying to prove ease of use and build a vision in the customer's mind that they could do this themselves. And the third portion of a demo, which is the one that I recommend generally holding back and only presenting if people are interested in seeing it or having questions on it, is how to set things up.
I'm just taking notes here.
Sure. And we could easily talk through the, why this approach works so well. And you have stumbled into this sort of intuitively and to a certain degree because of your managers and your own personal experience.
Yes.
But I will share with you that 90% of the pre-sales population still do things the bad, old, painful way of an example that I like to use as an analogy is the cooking show type of thing, where there are really 3 steps. There's prepping all the ingredients, right? Setting everything up, chopping the onions, peeling garlic, and all that stuff. There's the workflow of actually, combining the ingredients and cooking them. And then there's the final result, which is showing the plated, ready-to-eat dish. And
right. Yeah.
Traditional demos take you through and by the way, this is a great analogy and metaphor at the same time. The tears associated with chopping onions,
yeah.
and the burns associated with that deep fat frying of the onions. And what people are really interested in is the end result first, because once they consume that end result, and if it looks, in this case, tastes interesting or delicious, then they'll begin to ask questions about how was that done? How did you get there?
Yes, I gotta tell you, I'm hungry now.
There you go.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and yes, I would have loved to have found your book earlier. So,
well, that's still available, so it's a good thing.
No, I bought it. It's just gonna be here like end of February.
Okay.
It's gonna be part of my book club.
You're getting shipping. You're getting a physical copy of the book or the Kindle.
I like physical copies. I don't like the Kindle. I just like having a book in my hand.
Do you, as a curiosity question, do you mark it up? Do you put in Post-it notes or underlinings or whatever with books?
I buy it with the intention of doing that, but then I don't do it. But like every book I read, I'm like, I'm gonna write notes in it, but then I decide, just either note on the side or I don't like ruining my books.
I fully understand. It's rare that I actually physically mark up books. What I'll tend to do is make occasionally, if it's a book I really want to abstract or pull some ideas out of, I'll put sticky notes on the pages and try to align the sticky notes with the top of the paragraph or the element that I want to pull out. But I hate marking up books. It's funny. It must have something to do with, I don't know what. Probably just personal stupidity.
Well, no, like I understand. I like my books pristine. As we were discussing more specifics related to my demo and my products, which might not be of interest to anyone not in the networking world, Peter brings up the 4 stages of sales engineering, and it goes something like this.
4 stages are as follows. Unconsciously incompetent.
Okay.
Which means we don't know what we don't know.
I was
In other
there.
words,
Yes.
You were there. Unconsciously incompetent is where most SEs are with respect to most traditional demos. People have been doing the same demos, the same type of traditional demos. Let me show you how to set things up. Let me execute a bunch of workflows. And oh, it looks like we ran out of time before we got to the best stuff at the end.
Yeah.
That's traditional demos, and that's unconsciously incompetent because people don't know that there could be different and better ways of doing things, and that in fact those traditional demos are so painful. Consciously incompetent means that you're aware that there are problems and you're potentially interested in actually fixing them. And that's to a certain degree where we need to move a lot of the SE populations to realize that most demos are painful and boring. Consciously competent means you now know what to do and how to fix it, and you're taking those steps. And then eventually, hopefully, we get to the point where we are unconsciously competent, which means we just do those right things without having to think about them anymore.
Yes. So I believe I am in the consciously incompetent, which is why I started the podcast.
So there you go. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of the case. You realize there are things that you'd like to do better, and you're seeking out those solutions, and that's a very good position to be in. Yeah. Unfortunately, when you look at most SEs who have been, I'm saying SEs really meaning pre-sales in general, who have been 5 years or longer in the role, well, I'll ask you as a question, how do they perceive themselves, most of them?
Well, in my old company, most of them perceive themselves like it's working, why break it?
And I would even go a step further and suggest that not only do they think it's working, why break it, but their belief is they're at the top of their game. Their demos are terrific. They know the technology, they know how they want to present it. They've got their verbal delivery down. They know when to throw in a little joke and so forth. They really believe they're at the top of the game, and they're not open to hearing about the possibility of change. And that's the single most dangerous position to be in. It's not only unconsciously incompetent, it's arrogantly unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, like, with the people that I've worked with, almost everyone is trying to improve. As my meeting with Peter was coming to an end, we started talking about the different audience that we may face as we're doing a demo and the different levels within an organization and what each of them would like to see in a demo.
And that is that there's no such thing as one size fits all demo. You typically have 4 constituencies at least that you need to be concerned with and think about. And each of them have their own sets of objectives, needs and problems they're trying to address, and capabilities they're looking at of the software. So for example, if you're presenting to executives, what is it they want to know?
The reports.
They want the high level reports, the dashboards. How's my business operating? Where are there problems that we need to address? Where are there opportunities? Where are there exceptions I want to look at? Middle managers, they're interested in the same type of information, but generally a level down, meaning they want to know not only where are there problems, but okay, we need to characterize this problem because I need to assign it to an engineer to address, right?
Yep.
And then there's the engineers who are the people that are actually executing the workflows, and their perspective is very different from a middle manager or certainly a senior executive. And then there's likely system administrators or IT whose job is to, make sure the software fits into the environment, administer it, set up users, kill users, deal with upgrades, and so forth. And their perspective is one of what's the least I need to do to set this up and keep it running? How much of a pain in a hoo-ha is it going to be? Traditional demos, which you're thankfully not doing, try to embrace the needs of all four of those constituencies in a spaghetti-like bowl of noodles flapping in and out, representing, now I'm an end user, now I'm a middle manager, now I'm in IT, and it ending in tortured confusion at the end of it.
Sounds
there
like
you go.
fun.
Yeah, that's a traditional demo. So the reports can be very, very important the higher you go in the organization.
Yes. And that brought us to the end of the conversation. It was a long session, and Peter provided a lot of value to me. And I'm trying to transfer as much of it as possible to you without giving out any proprietary information, hence this new format. So I hope you guys can take some of the information provided here to either improve your demo, figure out what needs to be worked on, or to understand that you're in great shape and you're good to go. So when I was talking to Peter, he was talking about the 4 stages of sales engineering. And I realized that I've talked to a few people in the first stage, which is unconsciously incompetent. But the good news is that if you are listening to this podcast, I don't know where my voice, excuse me. The good news is if you're listening to this podcast, then you are at a minimum past that stage and you know that you need to improve on. So, and that's great news. Peter did mention that he would be happy to come back for an official podcast if we can get enough information out of this video that I gobbled up together. So check out the YouTube video and check me out trying to stumble my way through the demo for Peter. And once you listen to this podcast, once you listen to that, watch the YouTube video, if you'd like me to get him back on the show to discuss his methodology and the 3 portions of a demo, reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Let me know that you'd like me to bring Peter back. I can't promise anything, but all I can promise is that I'll do my best to get him back. So show notes for the episode are at wethesalesengineers.com/show49. You will find a link to the YouTube video there and also his book, Great Demo. Before we move on, I want to thank everybody who participated in the giveaway. It was successful, and unfortunately, I can only give 5 people some of my time, as it's getting impossible right now to schedule anything due to work, home, a bunch of stuff. I am, however, extremely happy to be able to sit down with 5 people and help push their career forward. So I'm excited about that. And that's it. I really don't have much else to say. Subscribe to the show if you haven't already. And I will see you next time. With that, this is Ramsey, signing off.